Hey Destination, I'm John, and today we're going to dig through one of the Gospels. We've been going through this series, going through the story of the greatest man who ever lived, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Now, Jesus' story is recorded in four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These books are usually referred to as the Gospels, which means good news. Now, that's not just good news for people that lived a long time ago. That's good news for you and I, that we get to live in the fullness of everything that God has done, is doing, and will continue to do. Now, today, we're going to be digging into one of the books that records this story, one of my favorite of the 66 books of the Bible, because all of them are pretty much my favorite, the book of Matthew. Now, Matthew was a tax collector before he met Jesus, definitely a person that was well-educated, definitely good with numbers if he was doing the tax collecting thing. And Matthew would have been, at first, an outsider, even to the disciples. The story of when Jesus gets Matthew's attention and pulls him into the circle is one of amazement to me. Nobody was more hated than the tax collectors at the time, because they were seen in an era where the Jewish people were being oppressed by the Romans. The tax collectors were seen almost as collaborators, people that were cooperating with the Roman Empire, people that were pushing down on their own people to get ahead for themselves, people that thought they were too good. And so to the average Jewish person, the Matthew would have been one of the last people that they would have recruited. But when Jesus looked at Matthew, just like he would look at me and you, he saw the plan and the purpose of God all over his life. And so he pulled them in. And I even remember reading the scriptures that Matthew, the first thing Matthew does when this happens is Matthew throws a party. Man, we are party people here at Destination. And Matthew gathers a bunch of his friends to meet Jesus. And everyone is shocked that Jesus is spending time with sinners. And Jesus simply responds with this: I did not come for people that are well. I came for people that are sick. And guess what? That's what the gospel is. The gospel is the good news that doesn't matter where you've been. Jesus came for you, to redeem me, to change our story. And so today, as we learn a little bit about the book of Matthew and its author, we're going to just dive right in. So Matthew was one of the books written after the book of Mark, probably still around the 80-45 to 80-60 era. Now, it's an awesome book, and it was probably written to a Jewish audience. Now, we know this for a couple of reasons. One, Matthew consistently talks about a theme of fulfillment. See, when the Jews were expecting Jesus to come as the Messiah, people started popping up, prophets of God, that were pointing the way forward to say, hey, a Messiah is coming. And they'd give clues or hints by heaven of the things that this Messiah would do. And Jesus came and fulfilled so many of these prophecies that it was 100% proof that he was the one that people were looking for. Matthew hints at this not just by the fulfillment of the prophecies that every Jewish person would have been familiar with. Matthew actually points in Jesus' genealogy or his family tree. He sends it back to Abraham, the leader of the patriarch of the Jewish people. Because as you remember, the father Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, that Abraham, that's who Matthew brings it back to. He says this: listen, Jesus isn't just some guy coming out. He is the king that we've been waiting for. He's the son of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. He's the son of King David. He's coming in this line. And so he is coming in to be part of that. Not only that, but Matthew emphasizes certain aspects of Jesus' story that are close to another person that is part of the Jewish heritage. That is Moses. Now, Matthew is the one that emphasizes that Jesus came as a young person, that there was, at the time of his birth, that there's this great slaughter of the young people. Jesus had to hide out, where of all places? In Egypt for a period of time before beginning his ministry, before coming back home. And so those are all comparisons that he started to give hints that the Moses that they've been looking for, this new Messiah, this new great prophet, this new great king, can be found in the person of Jesus. And so as we look at that, there's a couple of things that Matthew also does. Matthew writes out a lot of the challenges that Jesus would give to the Pharisees. Now, the Pharisees and the Sadducees were the political leaders of the day for the Israelite people. A couple of things that Jesus was against them doing was they had a habit of seeing something that was in the law or something that God had told people to do. And they would say, hey, just in case we don't do the thing that God wants us not to do, let's add this rule and then this rule and then this rule to the things that God isn't telling us not to do. And so they would add and add and add and add and add and add weights and laws that no one could fulfill and no one could live up to. And Jesus consistently challenged the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the political leaders of his day. And so when Jesus comes along the line, this is Matthew's message to every Jewish person that's reading this book. Hey, Jesus is the person that you've been waiting for. He is the king that you're desiring. But he doesn't just say he is the king for the Jews. He says he's the king from the Jews. Matthew does two things that are very unique for his book, where he, even though it feels like a book written for the Jews, he points out two very special things. You might remember the Christmas story, the Magi that came with the gifts. Well, those guys weren't Jewish, but they were some of the first to acknowledge and to receive Jesus Christ as king. They walked all the way from the Orient to come and recognize him and said, there's been a star and this is going to be a great king and he's going to be mighty. Isn't it crazy that for a book written for the Jewish people, man, he would highlight somebody like that? That's a clue and a hint that God's desire was to start out with the Israelite nation, but that the good news of the gospel would go to the ends of the earth. Speaking of the ends of the earth, at the end of the book of Matthew, Jesus is giving his command to his disciples. He's telling them, hey, I want you to go and make disciples, not just of Judea, not just of Samaria, but of all nations. Guess what? All nations, unless you're Jewish, means you, means me. In the Jewish tradition, typically a Gentile would have been excluded from the promise of God. This was supposed to be a king for the Jews, but instead it was a king from the Jews. And guess what? That's not just good news for Jewish people, that's good news for all of us. That the king that they were waiting for is really the Messiah we've all been waiting for. He has come to bring end to death, hell, and the grave. Because he has come, he can be the king we've been waiting for. And listen, as we study these scriptures, as you go through the story of Jesus, this mighty king of the Jews, remember that he's not just there for them, he's there for you. And as we study these books together, we can't wait to see what God will do in your life. So hey, come find us next week as we study the Gospels.